In part 1 of our lighting setups for photo and video, portrait photographer Monica Sigmund showed us some incredibly useful techniques to achieve dramatic effects when it comes to portraiture lighting. In this second part, I'll be showing you some useful tips on how to make your video portraits pop. Stick around. Now we get to talk about my favorite aspect of lighting, and that's video portraiture lighting. And it's not different from still lighting, but you have to make sure that when your subject is moving that they're lit from every angle. And that's a lot different than shooting still lighting because the model isn't going to be moving in still portraiture lighting. But in here we have to make sure that our characters react to the light and react to the scene and that they're lit perfectly when filming. So I'm going to show you how I set up my lights. It's a very simple procedure, but the results can be really breathtaking. So let's take a look. All right, now the first thing that you want to set up is your far key light, and this goes on the opposite side of the face that we want to have the shadows. So we're going to position this 3-foot softbox, and I've got it about 4.5 to 5 feet away from our subject. And the softbox is great because it's going to cast really nice soft tones on the face, and it's going to come out with a really nice balanced image. When you're shooting video portraiture, this is great too because when the subject moves around, it's really going to be able to catch all that light, and it's going to look really beautiful. Now, I am only using at about 50% power on this because we don't want to overpower our subject, especially when we're shooting on a white background. All of this light here is going to reflect and then bounce around, so we need to compensate for that. But the next thing we want to talk about is our hair light or our highlight light. And this is one of my favorite lights because if you notice, let's go ahead and look at the subject here. When we turn it off, we can see that all of the rim light on him is gone. He's kind of like ultra flat. There's really no definition, no tone. And we really want to make sure that when we are shooting video that we have separation from that background. I'm going to turn all these lights off one by one and show you what that looks like. So we've got our key light set up, and you can see really just how nicely it creates these really soft shadows. We're getting some Rembrandt lighting in here, and it's really picturesque. This is a very dramatic style of lighting, and it works, but we want to make it a little more dynamic. And to make it more dynamic, we're going to turn on 2 different types of lights. I'm going to add a fill light to the background here, and I'm also going to turn on a highlight that's going to then accentuate his shoulders, his hairline, and everything in between. And already you can see how it's taking shape. And now we're getting some really nice shadows in the center on the right-hand side of his face, and it's really creating a nice dynamic balance between our far key light and then our rim light. Now, the next step here is I want to make sure that the background is all white because we are shooting on a white backdrop. So I'm going to turn just our simple nano light tube on, and these are great because you can take them anywhere. They're super versatile, and when I turn this on, the whole scene almost completely changes when we have all 3 lights added together. So now that we've got the lighting set up, we're gonna have him demonstrate what it would be like as if he was talking to someone in an interview. And this is important too, so he's gonna be moving around, and we wanna make sure that the light is hitting him on all the right spots. So I'm gonna have him go ahead and just start pretending to chat to our fantastic cinematographer over here, Matt. And I'm gonna step out of frame because you don't need to see me in frame. But as you can see, as he's walking through this and he's talking, we're getting some really nice, lovely exposure on his face. We're having some highlights on his right shoulder. And all of this really just adds to a very natural, almost indoor light. It's very soft, it's very beautiful. What I'm gonna be doing now is I'm gonna be adjusting, I'm gonna be adding a hair light over top of him, and we're just gonna see how that affects the scene, because sometimes I like to have a nice key light come in, but I also like to have a really nice kind of highlight or softbox on the top just to give it some extra oomph in the shot. So I'm gonna raise this up. So that's pretty much it. You don't really have to do too much to make it look great, but if you take all of these little elements and add them together, it really creates a nice, beautiful, balanced image. All right, now that we've completed our basic light setup, we've got this really nice, beautiful, natural look. We're gonna go for a little bit more dynamic, a little more flashy. We're gonna use some RGB light. I'm really excited, so let's go take a look. All right, now we're talking about my favorite thing, and that's RGB lighting. And just using these little light tubes as your NAN lights, they can really add a whole lot of flair and a whole lot of extra love to your scene. And I really like them because it really helps tell the story. In this particular scene, I want to make it seem like she's in a club and she's having a good time, and maybe she's waiting for someone on this really cool couch back here. The first thing that we're going to do is talk about the light that I'm using over here, and that's the Aperture 300D, and I've got this linked up with a gobo spotlight, and what this does is it's going to create a nice little cast on our subject over here. It's going to be very harsh lighting, but it's going to be very mood-centric, which I love.
When setting up the lights, I place them around the subject, ensuring that the hue and saturation all match so that the intensity of the light and color look like one in the final scene. These types of lights are super easy to use, and by simply placing them on the ground, we can create some very interesting and moody light that makes the scene pop. Since we're using 3 different colors, when we turn the lights on, you can see how each impacts the other, creating our final image.
All right, we can see that the light on her face is really harsh, but that's really what I want to go for, because I want to create a really moody scene, and having this gobo spot just directly on our subject here, it really makes her pop in the scene. But to give it that extra kind of oomph, I'm using all of these nice little nano light tube lights, and they really allow you to add more depth and more dimension to the scene. And that's really all you need to do to create beautiful continuous lighting. And it's not a super serious hard setup to do. All you need are a few RGB tube lights and a spotlight, and you're good to go. There's a lot of different varieties out there that you can purchase. Me personally, I love the Aperture brand as well as the Nan lights. And when I'm shooting, I'm using the Sony Alpha A7S III, which is one of my favorite video cameras to shoot just because it's amazing in low light. And especially when we're capturing a scene like this, we're gonna be able to capture all those beautiful mid-tones, highlights, and shadows. And it's really just gonna look beautiful in post. Thanks for joining me on this reframe. I'll catch you next time.